Good morning. Well, it might not be morning when you're listening to this, but it is for Stuart Clarke and I. This is the very first episode of our online version of the Education Futures Forum, which has been put together with the Parent Pay Group. I'm David Cameron. I'm absolutely delighted to host it. The reason Stuart's with us this morning is because he was part of the live event that we did on the 18th of May, and he was there as a volunteer, which is not something I'm used to. Having had a long career in teaching, a volunteer's a rare person in my life. But Stuart was very keen to come along because he's been doing really interesting work in his school around AI in particular, which we'll talk about in a minute. But he's also somebody who I think has a genuine commitment to ensuring that we do have young people in Scotland with the best possible opportunity of not only meeting, but shaping the challenges of the future. So, Stuart, thank you very much for joining me this morning. I know all about you, but for the benefit of listeners who don't, tell us a bit about you, your school, and particularly what you've been doing around AI.
Thanks, David. And it was really a pleasure to have a chat with you this morning about this. I'm head teacher here at Mearns Castle High in East Renfrewshire. Previously, I was a head teacher in Inverclyde and a deputy head in Argyll before that. So well-travelled and in a mix of schools and all with fantastic young people. And it is, of course, such a privilege to work with young people. And that's really why I was so keen to be involved in this event, because when it's a really important conversation to look to the future and to have a vision for what that future should and could be like for young people of today and of course going forward for future generations. And we are at such a pivotal point that shaping that is crucial, and everyone coming together to shape it. And you've mentioned it's rare to have a volunteer. It's actually quite rare to have that sort of event and that sort of opportunity to have such an open dialogue with a range of colleagues, both in education and out with. So it was a pleasure to be involved. It was a great conversation. And I'm also excited by the fact that you're keen to continue the conversation and to ensure that it's not a one-off in that sense. So it was a real pleasure to be involved.
Good. Now tell us about your AI developments, because I think that really intrigued people when we had the live event on the 18th of May.
Well, I think one of the things, there's a number of facets to our developments on AI as a school. I think we first of all need to fundamentally, as educators, acknowledge that when we view AI and we consider the implications of AI in education, that we aren't talking about how we use some additional tools. That's a natural starting point for many colleagues. How they use AI, how their colleagues are using AI, the extent to which we should allow learners to use AI, and the extent to which it should inform our planning and experience in the classroom. All of that's important, but as a school, the debate and discussion that we've been having is how do we respond to a fundamental shift in the economy and the experience of young people as citizens within society? And that therefore leads to bigger questions around the nature of learning, the process of learning and assessment, and the end product around about the manifestation of that learning within the classroom, not the end product in terms of the economy, the end product in terms of what we're working towards as learners, as teachers. And that includes that experience and that enjoyment of learning and that sense of belonging and citizenship. And it also includes, though, what it means to be successful within a radically different economy. And if you look back through history at any of the big significant changes since the Industrial Revolution right through to now, there has been an evolution, of course, within education, often responding to those changes. But there hasn't been a change as significant as this in relation to the nature of knowledge and how knowledge is formed and then used. And so as a school, the debate that we are having includes, yes, how we ensure responsible use of AI and what that means, and protocols around that, and training and processes. But we had 70 parents in the school the other night debating what they feel their children really need from us and what their hopes and aspirations are for the future. and how we can support that and be part of that. And the final point I would make is that taking that broader approach of how we ensure well-being and connection and a sense of success for our learners also means planning for, not just responding to, but planning for the nature of pathways being very different. Currently, around about 80% of our young people go straight to university. As Richard, one of the panels, mentioned, in the past that would have been seen as the keys to the kingdom for many young people. But we need to broaden our horizons as educators around about what that sense of success and a sense of fulfilment is within a different economy and society. So we are taking purposeful steps. We've appointed the UK's first principal teacher of AI literacy. We're introducing a programme on AI literacy, which is a taught standalone programme, but we're also developing AI literacy across the curriculum. And we are ensuring that we're part of that conversation with schools across the country about how we get it right, because no one school will get it right. This is all new. We need to support each other and learn from each other. And so we're also developing a conversation with the ACE network of AI educators in Scotland, which is a new network, and in conversation with Edinburgh University around about how we also evaluate the work that we're doing to ensure that we contribute towards the system too.
You're a very powerful voice, Stuart, because you're in a successful school by any conventional standard, in probably the most successful local authority in these terms in Scotland. East Renfrewshire has always been proud of its high attainment, high achievement, and you've had a superb inspection report for the school. So you're a school that's in a real position of strength, and as I say, particularly around all of the conventional standards that people apply these days. You've got the data, you've got the numbers, you've got all of that, and yet you have this astonishing ambition, I think, to make sure that you are more than that. And one of the things that you did very powerfully at the live event was to talk about your why. You know, you were very clear that we shouldn't be talking about the what and the how until we'd answered the why. So tell us more about that breadth of ambition that you've got for your school. That's the wrong way to put it. It's the breadth of ambition you've got with your school. But tell us a bit about that, and tell us a bit about this big question of why.
And I think it's interesting that you've spotted that in terms of that sense of ambition that we have as a school community to ensure that it's absolutely clear what we're driving towards and why. One of the things that I always talk with my team about in this school and in my previous school as a head teacher is that we often talk about vision statements in schools and, vision, values and aims. And I always, from my point of view, correct that slightly and talk about mission, because what drives us, what gets us out of bed in the morning as educators is the difference that we make to people's lives. Right now and then in the future, in their children's lives and their children's lives. It's amazing and inspiring to think about that. And so for us as a school, you mentioned those conventional measures. And interestingly, we don't tend to talk a great deal. There's not been a single improvement plan in 6 years in this school that has mentioned attainment, because fundamentally moving a percentage point up in terms of our 5 national is never featured. And our attainment has improved and improved. And the reason for that is because the experience has improved and improved, and the support has improved and improved, and the relationships have improved and improved. So all of that fundamentally has meant that learners feel more connected, involved, supported, successful. And that idea of the why, we've got a great opportunity within the curriculum improvement cycle to ensure that we, as I think put it at the event, that we double down on curriculum for excellence. Clear that developing responsible citizens, effective contributors, confident individuals, successful learners, if we do that, then as a society, we're successful together. And that is what I believe we're all working towards. I don't think it's that we're working towards moving up one place in a league table that is increasingly uh, irrelevant, increasingly irrelevant, because fundamentally we know that our learners need so much more than 5 level sixes as the be all and end all. And now, obviously, I want to ensure that we're doing really well in all measures, of course. And East Renfrewshire as an authority you've mentioned is incredibly ambitious. But when I first started here, one of the first things I spotted is again that mission for everyone attaining, everyone achieving through excellent experiences, and not just attaining, but achieving in that sense of success and that experience of valuing interests and skills and hobbies, all the things that make us human. And interestingly, in the context of AI, is that not more important than ever? That we've got that wider sense of what gives us enjoyment and fulfillment in life. And so the why, I think, for all schools within the curriculum improvement cycle, we're about to jump into looking at a new technical framework. We're about to jump into the what and the how in much more detail. And I think it's important that we don't lose sight of the why, because when times are uncertain, as they certainly are, and I think we'll all feel that uncertainty over the next number of years, it's the why that anchors us, and keeps us focused on we can do it together. So yeah, I think it was important to talk about that collectively at the Futures Festival.
You're a wonderfully timely reminder of how important it is not to get trapped in dichotomies, which I think we often do in education debate. So curriculum for excellence is assailed currently from all sides because it hasn't delivered the international comparisons in attainment that people sought, and it's denying Scotland its traditional place as a leading educational power in the known universe and beyond. Um, and 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 what you talk about is you talk about the central core of curriculum for excellence, and you get bonus points because you were able to roll out the 4 capacities one
I was
after the other
panicking.
without well done. But at least you panicked and managed. The rest of us panic and fail. But you rolled out these core principles, and yet you're clearly someone who is questioning the content. You're saying we've got the why, but we need to make it work through the what and the how. Is that a reasonable summary of your view, Stuart?
I think it absolutely is. And it's interesting because I've always been, as someone, I think I mentioned this at the festival, I've always been passionate about the importance of clear outcomes in education and being able to measure the impact that we have. I've always been passionate about that. Perhaps that's what drew me towards East Renfrewshire, in that sense. I've always been passionate about that. The reason for that is very personal, and I mentioned this at the Futures Festival, not only am I the first in my family to go to university, I'm the first in my family to get any qualifications, and experienced a significant level of hardship and difficulty in childhood, including being care experienced, my siblings being taken into care. I had significant social work intervention. And what made the difference for me going to school in the 90s in Paisley was teachers who were able to see past all of that and have ambition and communicate that. And fundamentally for me, it was getting the results that meant I could then go on and make a difference myself and pay that back and have that feeling of success. So I've always been drawn towards having, clear indicators, clear outcomes. But I think we're missing within the debate about CFE the fact that it was never intended to simply have us maintaining a place in literacy and numeracy in the PISA scales. We've been diverted a little bit in that. Now, of course, we want to see young people who have the fundamental skills. But if you look at other indicators in PISA, an understanding, the system develops an understanding of others. We're doing really well in that. And is that not even more important as society develops as it is, that we have young people who have an understanding of others and want to have an understanding of others and feel well placed to engage with others and be responsible citizens. At the fundamental start of CFE, we weren't saying we want to move up the international rankings in literacy and numeracy. We were saying we want to develop those learners that have those broad four capacities. Now, yes, within that development, perhaps there has been a lack of focus on foundational knowledge as part of that. And I think it's quite right that there's a refocusing in that respect. But a slight refocusing is different to saying we've been getting it wrong and that we need a shift, a huge shift back to, knowledge with high stakes assessment and the regurgitation of that. As if somehow, because that might move us up a couple of places in PISA, specifically in literacy and numeracy, or maths and science specifically, that will somehow address that need for the four capacities. As you've said, I often believe that we miss a balance in educational debate. Often colleagues naturally feel like they need to take sides. And I think that we can have it all. I think that we can have the foundational knowledge in place and the confidence that we're doing that. We can develop skills and we can develop well-rounded young people and be part of their journey that creates the society that we're looking for and that we all want to see. I think we can do that. And I don't think that we should feel that we've not been doing the right thing because simply of a few measures internationally. I think we need to have more confidence than that.
Excellent. And I think we've touched a lot on the day that we had in the Botanic Gardens on the 18th of May, and we'll put in the notes that go with this programme links to the report that's coming out on that day. You've mentioned Richard Gerver, who opened the conference wonderfully. We had Sugata Mitra, who for many people is an education legend. His Hole in the Wall TED Talk will also cite in the show notes. We had interesting workshops, I think. We had some very good open discussions and panels. And a couple of my very favourite discoveries, my two friends, Jamie and Iana, who are either making armour for spacecraft or growing food in space. Just remarkable people. But tell us, Stuart, what were your big takeaways from the day?
I think probably my biggest takeaway from the day was the importance of lifting our eyes and having a really open discussion about what's possible. And you mentioned about Jamie and Leanne being great examples of that. And you asked them a question which really struck a chord with myself. You asked them whether their success and their pathway was because of their experience in education or in spite of it. And as fantastic young people, they were incredibly diplomatic with their answer to that, knowing that there's a room full of educators as well. Again, developing those softer skills that help you with success. And for me, one of the important factors and opportunities that we have as we take forward and evolve CFE rather than radically go in a different direction, as we evolve CFE, is to ask how we are promoting that autonomy and curiosity and independence in learning that they demonstrate so well. It's that curiosity that's led them to that path. And I did ask them when we were chatting informally at some of those discussions, I asked them how often they had the chance in their schooling specifically to decide what they were learning and how often they would ask what they wanted to learn. And they said that hadn't happened. That wasn't part of their experience. And when you consider how curious they are and how creative they are, you know, for me, one of the takeaways from the day is to really, as educators, to really grasp onto that natural curiosity that young people have. I think that came across in Sagata's talk as well and in his work, is that natural curiosity to learn that young people have. And sometimes for adults to take a step back and to facilitate. And for me going forward, for us as a school, certainly, that's part of the discussion that we're having, is how can we give much more freedom and flexibility within a structure and with supports that allow that natural curiosity of learners to come, to come to the fore.
And that was a hugely consistent and powerful element of the day, was that emphasis on autonomy, on
Mhm.
curiosity, on the capacity for young people to shape learning, and tied together, I think, really well by yourself and Ruth Mackay, who was the other head teacher that we had involved with the idea of genuinely building that base, as you've talked about, foundational knowledge. So I would agree with you. I think there was a really powerful coming together on the day, not just of people, but of ideas. I'm really grateful to be part of it. I think what we need to be thinking about is what more we can do to give colleagues like yourself the opportunity to think, um, because we often lose that, don't we? We suffer from what I talk about as the tyranny of the immediate. The to-do list is so vast that the to-think list becomes shorter and shorter. And I guess that's where the parent pay group can play a role in terms of technological support for schools and so on, management information support for schools. But the key thing is the sharing, isn't it? You've talked a lot about that. You and I first met one another, I think, at a Pedigree event, which was very much a grassroots sharing activity. And we need to get the time for that. I'm really grateful to you, Stuart, not only for sharing with people this morning your thoughts, your impressions from the day, but also your willingness to share. I know that you've got an event arranged in your school. I'm not encouraging people to go because the parking problems I hear are already going to be immense. But that idea of putting your head above the parapet, being prepared to open up about what you're doing and what other people might or might not take from it, I think is one of the ways that we'll find our way to a much more successful future than we would otherwise. So, with my gratitude, thanks very much, Stuart Clarke.
Welcome. Nice to talk to you, David.